Hello, Erica Sanchez back with a quick summary of my inquiry paper, the final paper for the communication theory course, which is entitled Bakhtin's Theory of Dialogic in the Digital Age. So, in the old days, when someone died, face to face dialogue became extinguished. It no longer existed. We were unable to talk to this person face to face, obviously. In the past, the bereaved would create memorials using flowers and objects at the place where someone has died or is buried to keep the memory of this person alive. With the advent of Facebook, the practice of memorialization has become more and more popular on social media profiles. So when someone dies, the bereaved family and friends take to the deceased's Facebook profiles to post messages and continue talking to the deceased. In this paper, I will apply Bakhtin's theory of dialogic to messages left by bereaved family members and friends on the Facebook page of Orlando Sanchez, who died on September 27th of this year, 2014. First, a little bit of background. 21st century North Americans, as 21st century North Americans, we can construct messages and facilitate dialogue in face-to-face situations and in social media websites as well, both privately and publicly. The dialogue on social media outlets creates a sense of permanence that can't be found in face-to-face dialogue. These words are now etched somewhere and they live on forever in a medium where when they are spoken, they don't have that sense of permanence. On social media, a person existed before they died and then continues to exist after they've died because their identities are kept alive through dialogue. Culturally and historically, memorials have existed for some time. In Neolithic times, plaques were etched to memorialize and identify the dead. People who speak with or desire to speak with the dead are also an example of the efforts to keep the deceased identity alive. While this is not an example of unfinalizability, you can see the efforts already between the bereaved and the deceased, with the bereaved trying to continue the deceased's identity far past their death. The texts left behind by the deceased continue to speak to us after they have passed. In the past, dialogue may have become finalized in the death of the person it involved, but the presence of social identity via social media profiles helps dialogue to live on forever. That is to say, again, the words create a sense of permanence, and the dialogue between the bereaved and the deceased and the text of the deceased, since they've been written, it creates that permanence, and that dialogue can live on now forever. Bakhtin's theory of dialogic. Bakhtin states that dialogue occurs between specific participants involved in a specific situation. The dialogue is made up of utterances and involves many voices, or heteroglossia, which is many layers of voices. And utterances are spoken words that create a conversation. There's what he refers to as centripetal and centrifugal forces, which is the push and pull in dialogue. So centripetal forces try to make sense of the chaos in the world, and centrifugal forces are that chaos that centripetal forces are trying to make sense of. Dialogue then is unfinalizable until death, according to Bakhtin. So beyond our conversation ending at this very moment, that dialogue continues to exist until one of us has passed. He also believes in the idea that that we renegotiate our identities through this dialogue. So the world is ever changing, and with the world constantly changing and never being static, our identities are constantly being renegotiated through the dialogue that we receive, that we participate in. So these are just a few examples of the data I collected from Orlando's Facebook profile. Um, some of the messages are directed at him in a conversational way and create dialogue, and then some of the messages were served more as a memorial. Um, but these are just a few examples of those messages. My analysis of these messages, like I just stated, some of the messages posted to Orlando's profile after his passing served to memorialize him. These memorials were similar to the Neolithic plaques that were placed on the graves and serve as a continuation of the deceased's identity. The majority of the messages, however, were directed specifically to the deceased and served as continued dialogue, not only between the bereaved family members and friends, but between the bereaved and the deceased as well. These messages are the centripetal forces that are trying to make sense of the chaos or centrifugal force that was Orlando's death. So Orlando's death caused that sense of chaos in the bereaved's lives, and they use these messages and this continued dialogue to try to make sense of the situation and what they are experiencing emotionally. The identity of the deceased continues to be renegotiated by the bereaved. And this is kind of done in a monolithic way where the deceased continue to live through the memories of the bereaved. So it does change the identity of the deceased according to how they are remembered by the bereaved. However, it's still a continuation of the deceased's identity. And the bereaved continue to speak to and about the deceased on social mediums like Facebook, making the dialogue unfinalizable even after death. So because of this continued dialogue on Facebook profiles between the deceased and the bereaved and the bereaved family members amongst themselves and the friends, more so keep this identity of the bereaved of I'm sorry of the deceased alive, and it continues this dialogue, which continues the renegotiation of the deceased's identity. As you can see, Bakhtin's idea that dialogue is only finalizable in death doesn't really apply any longer because of the advent of social media, because these conversations are able to continue, these dialogues are able to continue far beyond the passing or the death of someone. These dialogues can continue to evolve, and these identities continue to evolve as well. In my research, I did, however, find that perhaps some more research can be done, in that Bakhtin's theory of unfinalizability, or theory of dialogic, an idea of unfinalizability and only being able to finalize in death, may have not been specifically true or accurate far beyond the advent of social media. So practices of spiritual mediums and paranormal investigators suggest that dialogue may have been unfinalizable after death, even before the advent of social media. That is because the practice of spiritual mediums and paranormal investigators is to talk to the dead, to talk to the deceased, sometimes even with family members or friends that desire to speak to the deceased directly. And so, in that sense, dialogue is still continuing after the death of a person. And that's it. Thank you.